Hey, everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, and we got a treat for you today. That's right, we do. And I know I'm yelling. I don't mean to be, but I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. 3 themes-ish as usual. We're starting out with our special guest. You'll see him shortly. Talking about his big board. His big board for quarterbacks in particular. Then we're going to move on to some controversial things. We're going to do it in what's happening in Vikings land this week. And Vikings X and the blogosphere is all aflutter over Justin Jefferson's contract extension. We'll see how that goes. We'll touch on some coaching situations. And then in the final theme, in our positional review, we're going to go with the big round bellies on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive linemen. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, Darren. How you doing? How's things in the great white north?
Hey, living life here, Dave. Everything's going great. But just really excited about this show. It's going to be a lot of fun. As you were trying to lead everybody into the fun that we are going to have.
Yeah, and there may be a little bit of sarcasm in there, but hey, it happens. We have a show ready for you. But we named this one Justin Jefferson Extension at an Impasse. We'll find out more about that because literally Vikings fans are getting a little bit worried over that. And we'll talk to you why you should or shouldn't be. We'll find out. I do want to say hello to everybody that's in the chat already. I know I've skipped a bunch already, but I want to welcome Norspheus, Raymond, Nick, the wonderful and beautiful Miss Mary, Sean. We see you there. Timothy's here as well. Of course, my buddy Mafia with a great first name. The doctor himself, Doc Proto's in the house. Raymond's here. Raymond's a regular. We love you, Raymond. And who else am I missing? Delton's here as well as Ron. Thank you for joining us today. And John gets in at the last second. Well, we have a special surprise for you. Somebody I know well because I did 3 years of podcasts and videos with. You know him as well, Darren, a friend over on the Gallahorn, a Facebook group that talks Vikings, good friend of ours, and hopefully of yours, because he happens to be a founding member of Vikings Report with Drew and Ted. And I'm sure most of you here are well aware and subscribed to Vikings Report with Drew and Ted. And we're going to talk with the one and only Drew Bunting in Theme 1. And here we go. I wish to welcome the Drewster, the best bassist I know. I even have that somewhere. Where is it?
That was a while back, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Oh, here we go.
Thanks for having me on.
Drew remembers that from the good old days.
Yeah, that's when I used to do shows with Lemmy.
But I want
Motorhead.
R.I.P. Lemmy, yeah.
What the hell are you guys doing on the bloggers? What the hell's going on?
Hey, we're taking our 2 decades plus each of talking publicly. on the Minnesota Vikings and partaking or hopefully sharing some of our wisdom that comes with age and the punishment over all those years of our Minnesota Vikings we all love. So we try to break it down for everybody. And this week is no different. We've got some fun topics to roll over. But first, I wanted to introduce your big board.
Yeah?
I've known you for many years. I've even helped you do it graphically for you.
Yeah,
Your
that's
big
right.
board-
That's right.
Your big board is generally well over 85% accurate as to players being drafted and generally where they're being drafted at. That, folks, is higher than some of the best experts out there when it comes to draft knowledge and putting out draft boards that you can find anywhere on the internet. Drew's got as high, if not higher, a hit rate.
I'm always higher.
Drew grinds the tapes and he looks and he finds stuff, and it may not be from the normal, hey, let's look at these deep analytics. How accurate is this quarterback? Does he put the ball on the fingertips exactly where it's supposed to? No, he watches tapes. And from years and years of playing and watching football, he knows what is good and what is not. And he places them generally where they end up. And so I just wanted you to know. Just wanted you to know we've got the Drewster here. And Drew, again, thank you so much for coming on, and welcome. You're always welcome here, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be on here. This is my number one go-to source for Viking information. I mean, we do a show, me, Ted, and Chris Gates, but we sometimes get off the rails a little bit. You guys have the info. I watch every week, and it is my favorite show for Viking info. And yeah, we've known each other a long time, and I appreciate having me on the show today, and thank you for the kind words.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's time to get started, is it not, Darren?
It is, Dave. Let's do it. Let's get the slides going, shall we?
Okay. Start off with the board itself.
Wow, that's fancy.
Just like we used to do back in the day, buddy.
Yeah, that's the same ones you used to make for me. That was like 2018, dude. 2017? Yeah. That was a long time ago. There it is. There it is.
I think if for people who might not be aware, Drew, David was mentioning it earlier, is that Drew has these big boards for every position, even the specialists, the kicking guys. He does it annually every year. It's one of the things I look forward to in the off season, just reading to see what what his big board's gonna look like for every position. And he puts out guys that he puts what he calls Viking alerts on as well, like the guys he thinks the Vikings should be looking for. So this is something he does annually. He does it. He's been debuting them and launching them this year and the past couple of years on the Vikings Report. And your first one was quarterbacks a week ago. And quarterback has been like, that is the talk of the town. If you're a Vikings fan right now, what are they going to do with that? And so one of the options is drafting a quarterback of the future through with one of these college prospects. And that's why we wanted to get down and talk about it today. Dave and I already talked about the quarterback position a month ago on the show and kind of looking at basically like what we think the Vikings are going to do, but we want to get into this class this year and talk about it. And there you see your draft big board right up there, who you got in your top 15 and where you think they're going to go. And now we're going to get into asking you some questions. We're going to grill you, Drew, on this class and what.
You grill me all you want, as long as you're not FBI or DEA. Grill away.
I have first.
I'm used to being grilled.
How is this quarterback class, the guys on your big board, versus quarterbacks you've graded over the years? How does this class compare to them?
There's going to be a lot more guys that end up being starters or franchise guys, if you will, I think, in this draft. This reminds me of, remember that old 2004 with Big Ben and Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning? Those guys. We don't want to forget the great Matt Schwab. He was in there too. But,
hey,
this reminds me. We're going to get. Yeah, he ended up not being a scrub quarterback. He ended up being pretty good. We're going to have a lot of, especially this top six, which is primarily where everybody wants to talk, as I call the Fab Six. There's going to be, I think, all these guys, and I feel about Rattler throwing them in there. We're going to get a lot of starters out of this draft. And over the last 3 drafts, there's been 33 quarterbacks taken, and by my count, we got 9 hits.
Ooh.
And that's including Sam Howell, who we don't know where we're getting yet. So that's kind of a half hit. So 9 out of 33, that's about the ratio. You know what's crazy? Football, for 100 years, people have been looking at football players, and they still can't get it right, guys. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. Hey, I was just going over. Somebody had asked, when was the last time quarterbacks went 1, 2, and 3?
I do not know that.
It was not that long ago. It was 2018? No. Less, 2021. It was Lawrence, Wilson, and
right.
And I'm trying to remember who the third one was. But the only one that's partially paid out is Lawrence. Everybody else is a bust.
There was a bunch of busts in that draft early.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Lance was
was the third one. Yep.
Yeah, if you look at the top 6 guys, I mean, it's like the back half of the top 10 did better than the first half of the top 10. That's for certain.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but yeah, there's a lot of busts. I don't necessarily see as many busts in these top 6 as I normally would. I would say there's probably 2 guys normally out of this thing that are going to be really franchise guys, and the rest are going to sit on the gate. But you take those top 3 guys, which are top 3 on everybody's board, including mine, you take them out of there. Bo Nix and McCarthy are first 2 quarterbacks taken if those 3 guys aren't around. And they're going to be damn good quarterbacks. So I like this draft, Dave.
Good. Hey, it's perfect timing for us, hopefully.
I don't know how Vikings are going to do, but.
Well, here's a question for you, Drew. My first question is that you got it up there. We know that Caleb Williams is your number 1 guy, but the Vikings' chances of getting him, I think, are not very good. They're going to have to give up if they want to do it. They're probably going to have to trade up to number 1. They're going to have to give up a king's ransom to do that. And we don't even know if the Bears would really be willing to deal to a divisional rival. They might pick Williams themselves. That's what's going on. But B, would they trade the number 1 pick to a divisional rival so they could get the franchise guy? I don't think that's likely. But let's just assume that the Vikings aren't in position to get Williams. They don't trade up to get the number 1 pick. Who would be the guy that you'd pick? You think the Vikings should pick if Williams is out of the running?
Yeah. There's too many intangibles of the arrow pointing down for us. We're not getting Caleb Williams. Before I get into this, I want to mention something that Chris Gates had said on our studio show with our quarterbacks. He brought up a very good point, saying if Chicago, Washington, and New England all want a quarterback, 100% want a quarterback, and don't want to do any deals, then they're going to take those 3 quarterbacks, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Chris Case mentioned that, and I think that's a very good point, because if those 3 teams want them, those 3 guys are gone. Those are going to be the first 3 taken. I don't see that changing up anywhere. Another one to add in for Caleb Williams is that really the quarterback that KOC likes, his style? So I don't think we're going to get him. Drake May. Okay, let's look at it from the Vikings standpoint. First of all, the Vikings, they have their eyes set on, out of these 6 guys, probably 2. Do they have their eyes set on 3? Do they have their eyes set on all of them? We don't know. But if you look at the quarterbacks that seem to fall in place with what KOC wants, that would be the pocket quarterback, which is Drake May and Bo Nix and Michael Penix, if you ask me. And then you got some other guys later on in my list. But say they're discussing this in the room. You got Wilf and all the suits and ties and Quasey. And I imagine, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like KOC would hold the card on this quarterback selection. Am I wrong? I mean, the owner gets what he wants in the end, but I think KOC likes the pocket guys. When he looks at Drake May, he's looking at a dude like Herbert. He's almost like Justin Herbert. And look at how much he's learned in only 26 starts. That guy's coming along just fine. The faster they learn, the better they're going to be. And I think Drake May would be the guy the Vikings would shoot up after, but they'd still have to give up a lot, Darren. I mean,
yeah.
do they have a guy? Do the Vikings have a guy selected now that's just going to drop to him at 11 and they take him? Is it as easy as that, or do they have their eyes set on trading up? I don't know.
That's a great question. We don't know. I think if the rumors were correct about what we were being told last year, and then it came out that they were willing to trade the farm to go up for Anthony Richardson, to me, right, what changed between last year and this year to think that they will not move up to try to grab the guy that they want? Now, it's going to be interesting to see. And your question about who makes the picks, who's going to have the biggest sway, I don't know if it may come down to who's the last one available they like. Because you're right. You know, the Grand Poobah was right. If the first three teams pick quarterback, who's left? And then there's going to be a mad scramble for that number 4 slot or 5 slot, most likely, to get up there.
Yeah.
Between us and Atlanta and whoever else wants a quarterback.
Out of those top 6, how many are going to be taken before 11? That's another question you got to ask yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got a question. If Drew, you're not the Vikings GM. Lord knows I wish you were.
I'm just a base player. I don't know much about this stuff.
Yeah, but you got a good football mind and how you do things. But you answered, you think Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell will go for the pocket guys. But you think that they might be enticed by somebody like Jaden Daniels that's a running type? Or at least as good?
You watch enough tape on Jaden Daniels. I mean, that would be probably the guy I'd trade up for to get a hold. That guy is crazy. Crazy playmaker. I love his game. That would be my guy I'd trade up for, because I want the Vikings to have somebody that can make plays out of the pocket and out of script and all that. We haven't had that in a long, long time. But how I look at quarterbacks and how KOC looks at quarterbacks is quite the different story. So it's got to be somebody. He remember Dobbs had those first 2 games, Darren? He's running around. I don't think KOC liked that. And you tried to switch him out of it. So if he doesn't like Josh Dobbs' game, then he's not going to like these guys that run around, like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. I mean, those guys, you got to let them play. You got to let them play their own game. You have to, or it's not going to go well.
So that this is a little bit, well, it's not off topic, but a question here is for both of you, but I guess Drew can weigh in first, is that, so as a coach, I think we've all coached at different levels in different sports, but as a coach, one of the things you're always taught is to, maximize, put your players in your, like, if you got a player who can do X well, then that's fine. But you've got to be able to use the best of the talents that you're given, and you've got to be able to evolve as a coach. And you're not always going to coach up the talents that you have. So it seems to me like if we always heard that Zimmer didn't want a quarterback like Case Keenum, who was a freelancer, and now. The kind of view is, well, KOC doesn't like the scrambly, wing it kind of guys like Josh Dobbs or Jaden Daniels. That bothers me a little bit if that was the case, because that kind of shows that as a coach, you need to be able to adjust and not close your mind to what you think is the optimum skill set for a quarterback.
Exactly.
I agree.
What happened with Josh Dobbs? Why did his game change all of a sudden? That's the head coach telling him, I don't want you to do this or that. I just want you to, when he first put him in there in that Falcons game, he just said, dude, we're up the creek without a paddle. Do whatever you want. And he did what he played his Josh Dobbs game, but I don't think KOC likes that. I'm just guessing. I'm not inside the guy's head, but what do you guys think, Dave?
Yeah.
I thought he liked some of that, but I think Dobbs was a little bit panicky. And once we got into the 3rd game and the 4th game with Dobbs, and he'd get a rush and he'd turn around and run away from the away from the guys, turning the back on the receivers, I think that drove him nuts because you can't make a decision. If you're a quarterback and you've got rush coming towards you and you take and instead of scrambling left or right and keeping your eyes downfield, he turned around and ran out with the back towards the receivers. You can't see something that comes open with your receivers if you're not looking downfield. And I think that's what drove him crazy. Now, if Jaden Daniels can move and run like that and keep his eyes downfield, I think that's exactly what KOC wants. But it's a discipline versus undisciplined. If you can run efficiently, make shit happen off the schedule, but all the while looking for stuff to come open, I think he's golden. I think he's good with that. I would be, right? That's Fran Tarkenton, right? You get out there and you make stuff move. Yeah, Fran turned his back every once in a while, but it was only to do a spin so he'd get out of the way, and then he was looking downfield and constantly looking to make the play downfield. As long as you're doing that, I think he's fine, and I think he likes the mobility at that point. But as soon as you got undisciplined and didn't do that, that's where the problem started. And I think that's why Dobbs was yanked. I could be wrong, but that's what I observed. Hey.
Yeah, well,
look who's in the chat.
If you wanted to trade up and take Jaden Daniels, I don't think any Viking fans are going to bitch about that, are they? Is that Glover?
Yes.
It is. Yeah.
G Lover. The one and only.
The legendary, my boss, Ted Glover.
Drewster, another question for you on the class.
Yeah.
Everybody can see up there on your big board, number 4, you got Mr. Bo Nix from Oregon. Now, our Tyler Fornes, not a big fan of Mr. Nix, doesn't like his game, doesn't want the Vikings to touch him with a 10-foot pole. You, however, last week on Vikings Report had quite a bit to say about Nix, and you got, I think, I know you have a different opinion on Nix. Is this a guy that you think can star on Sundays after? Like, can he be a plus quarterback in an NFL offense, and can he be a plus quarterback in a KOC offense?
I think he can. To be honest, I don't see. There's more to like about Bo Nix's game than not like, as far as I'm concerned, the tape I watched. I mean, people talk about his footwork and anticipation in the pocket. His footwork looked fine to me. I mean, it was a little off on a few plays, but they all are. Good pocket presence. He can get out of there and get you some yards. He seems to be in command of the offense. Threw 45 touchdowns and only 3 picks. And one of my criteria for quarterbacks is, are they getting better? Bo Nix a whole hell of a lot better at Oregon than he was at Auburn. Got better with accuracy, didn't turn the ball over as much as he did at Auburn. Now, I know they had better coaches at Oregon and certainly better players if you look at their wideouts with Troy Franklin and, those guys. But his game is a short game, moving the chains, intermediate stuff. I didn't see a quarterback more accurate 17 yards and in than Bo Nix. I didn't when I was doing looking at all my tape. I think the problems that Bo Nix has, guys, are easily coachable. They are. You could coach that stuff out of him. This guy started more college football games than anybody that's ever played college football. Now, that could be taken 2 ways. A ton of experience. What do you get from that? 15,400 yards. We have 113 touchdowns in his career. Should he be better after that many starts? Like we used to talk about with Kellen Mond, Darren. Kellen Mond, more SEC starts for a quarterback than anybody in history. And then I talked to you and Dave and go, shouldn't he be better then? Shouldn't he be better? And one of the things I mentioned on Vikings Report is Nix has 61 games under his belt. That is a lot of college football. That is a lot of college football. Drake May has 26, and it seems like May's already more polished. So you got to look at the experience from 2 different sides. Should he be better? He's 30% of all his passes are behind the line of scrimmage. That's how he gets 77% completion rate. But everything I see that's a problem with Bo Nix is easily coachable. The things you can't coach out of a quarterback are bad accuracy, And if the clock in their head isn't fast enough, if they can't process information, they are out on their ass working at Togo's before the end of the training camp. You got to be able to process stuff fast, and you got to be accurate. Now they're going to say, people are saying something about his accuracy. There's accuracy missing passes at people's feet, but there's also accuracy at throwing it sooner. Bo Nix has to trust it sooner. A lot of his incompletions came when he should have thrown it, and he waited that split second. You know what I'm talking about. You wait a little bit too long, the DB gets over there and tips it away, Dave. But if he would have thrown it a fraction of a second earlier, it would have been perfect. He has got a lot of good things going on for him, and if he gets in the right system with the right coach, Bo Nix is going to be a great quarterback in this league. So I'm not down on him. I'm not. He does too many things well to rip the guy.
A lot of interest and comments on old Nixie here and on the chat for sure.
A lot of people don't like him.
Yeah,
it's
look at his game from Auburn to Oregon.
Play. So, and when you talk about throwing short, that reminds me of my favorite episode of Good Morning Gallahorn, where Kirk went 30 for 32. You and Ted were all excited. Look at all those completions. And I was absolutely lit up saying, and not a single one went beyond 9 yards.
Yeah. He was 30 for 32, and Dave started out the show saying, that guy sucks.
Yep. Well, and I don't know if Nix is that way or not.
No, Nix did what Oregon asked him to do, guys. These quarterbacks don't do things on their own. If the coach tells you this is what I want you to do, like McCarthy, Harbaugh says we're going to run it. You're going to throw it 10 or 15 times a game. If you don't like it, go play for Northwestern. Coaches tell you what to do. That offense that Nix ran in Oregon, that is what he was instructed to do. What do you want him to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you got a point there. Ted leads us into our next question, which
it's something to do with boobs, right?
Oh, I would. Hey, we all like that topic. But anyways, now this one happens to deal with JJ McCarthy of Michigan, the national champion. Michigan
Say it again, Dave.
Wolverines.
Say it again.
The national champions who whooped up on Ohio State for what? The fourth year in a row?
Third year in a row.
Third year.
Next year will be 4 in a row.
All right. JJ McCarthy buzz is building. Whether it is because Coach Harbaugh talked about him being the best quarterback in the draft, or Thor Nystrom getting on there and saying, the scouts are crazy. This dude can play, and pointed to the in-depth analytics that shows that he can be the guy at this next level. Can he star on Sunday like he did on Saturdays?
Yes, and maybe not week 1. The best situation for McCarthy and Penix is going to be to sit and learn. And a lot of people think when guys sit on the sideline and learn in the NFL, it's because, watching tape and they're looking at the plays to do. Basically, if you're on the sidelines learning, you're looking at the speed of the game. The speed of the game for quarterbacks is the biggest transition from college to pros. That's why Mahomes ended up getting 53 touchdowns his first season or his second season, because he sat and watched the speed of the game. And he picked up that speed. The best way to pick up the speed of the game and the change to the speed of the game is sitting on the sideline. So I'd like to see JJ learn a little bit before he gets thrown to the Wolves. He's one of those guys you don't want to throw to the Wolves. He has a chance of being the best quarterback out of all these guys, including the running guys, because McCarthy is a winner. He's a gamer. He's been brought up the right way from learning quarterback from Jim Harbaugh. They had a 5-star guy, Christian McCaffrey's little brother was the best quarterback in the nation when Michigan recruited him. He got to Michigan with all the bells and whistles, number 1 recruit, and McCarthy beat him out. And that's just the way he is. Ultimate team player. He makes people around him better. I mean, that seems like a cliche, but J.J. McCarthy does. I mean, if you look at his wideout group, he had Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson, and that's pretty much it. He made a lot of those wideouts better. He could really good at pre-reading the defense. He could run the run pass RPO stuff out to the. You've ever seen McCarthy run? He's deceptively fast. He's a pretty fast guy.
I think he's more than deceptively famous, Drew. I think he's again, you've watched him like a gazillion more of him than I ever have. But what I have seen is a guy that, they talk about other mobile quarterbacks. He's really mobile. He can run fast, and the guy's got a cannon for an arm. From what I've seen.
If he would have been given the attempts that these other guys have gotten, Bo Nix, all these guys, McCarthy would probably be number one. But he's only given a chance to throw it 10 or 15 times a game because Harbaugh says we're going to run the ball. But every game I've seen McCarthy play, he is big on the money downs. 3rd and 12, late in the fourth quarter, you got to have a first down. He figures out how to get it done. And like I said, he makes everybody around him better. Now, this needs to be said. His first couple seasons with Michigan, they had the top offensive line in football. In 2021, they won the Joe Moore Award. In 2022, they won the Joe Moore Award. So when you're playing behind the best offensive line in football, that's kind of a luxury. JJ McCarthy has to get that clock in his head going a little bit faster, and that's going to be the difference of whether he makes it in the National Football League or not. He makes great decisions. You just got to make them faster. Sometimes you got to, be decisive and go for it right away. Naturally you're going to wait a lot in the pocket if you got time. Like Michael Pratt, who's on my list. That guy has 8 or 9 seconds to throw every pass at Tulane. Of course he's going to be good. I mean, I could do that, but McCarthy is every team player, Darren, Dave, every time you interview, look at my offensive line. Look at how my defense played. Look at Blake Corum on the ground. Look at Donovan Edwards. My tight ends played great. Got to hand it to my wide receivers and my coaches. He is the guy you want to mold into your quarterback because he's so willing to learn. He's such a positive guy, a positive teammate. That's him and Corum. Both, you get them on their team, they're not going to give you any diva shit. They're just going to play ball, and they're going to make the people around them better.
Isn't it great to have the best offensive line? Boy, I wish we had one of those.
Well, most of Michigan, when you say best offensive line, it was the run offensive line, Dave. They were a better run blocking team than, the difference of all that. You're the offensive line guru.
Right. But hey, it's all about aggression and wanting to beat the shit out of somebody. When he blast off that line.
The only bad decisions I ever saw McCarthy make in the 1,715 snaps I saw him play at Michigan is sometimes down in the red zone he got careless and threw interceptions from like the 10-yard line in. He wouldn't read the defense right. He got too hyped up on his first read. And one guy intercepted him twice last year in the Maryland game in the red zone. What did Michigan do? Got that guy in the transfer portal to join their team this year. So that's
smart.
No, Basham from Maryland had it read a couple times. So he gets a little antsy down there in the red zone. But JJ McCarthy, man, if that guy fell to 11 and the Vikings snagged him, I'd be pretty stoked.
Do you think he
I guess
falls to 11?
Yeah, does he drop that far?
That's the thing. I mean, it's how many quarterbacks are going to be taken before 11? And if you look at the top half of the draft, I think only Denver and the Raiders after the Vikings are kind of looking for a quarterback. And then after that, the back end of the draft, I don't see anybody needing a quarterback, maybe one team. So all the quarterbacks are going in the top half. So, I mean, what do you guys think? How many quarterbacks are going to make it in the first 10 picks? How many quarterbacks are going to be taken?
Yeah, like you guys talked about this on your show last week, Drew. So I feel like I'd just be stealing. But there's quite a few that would, in theory, are the Giants going to take a quarterback after signing Daniel Jones to that big deal? Are they going to be willing to have him? Like, how are they going to navigate all that? I don't really see them taking a QB, but I could certainly see JJ and Nix and Penix, depending on what either team likes. 2 of those 3 guys going in the top 10. Along with the big 3 already.
So what if 5 of them go and it gets down and then the Vikings take one at 11? Are people going to be saying, oh, they just did the panic? They panicked and took the only other guy. Or do the Vikings have their mindset on 2 or 3 of these top 6? That's the question I have. Because, Ponder, they took him because they got nervous. They panicked and took Ponder early.
Well, I think that's a
But
good lesson for them to learn, right? That Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, if he's smart, and we know that he is, that he's going to look at those past moves and not do the panic thing on that. I want to move on to Michael Penix because I don't get to watch a lot of college football, Drew, but Penix of these 6-7 guys, Penix is the guy I've actually watched 2 or 3 full games, and man.
fun to
I
watch,
love his arm. Love his arm. Like deep ball, can just sling it, throw it on a rope. But whereas McCarthy, the buzz has been building, I think Penix, particularly since the national championship game where he had a rough outing, and mind you, he was harassed on almost every time he dropped back to pass against an awesome Michigan defense. But it seems like his stock has kind of dropped a bit, surprising for a guy who almost won the Heisman. So, my question would be, if the Vikings don't trade up, they're at 11. Penix is there at 11. Do you take him if you're the Vikings?
Ooh. Oh, that's tough. I mean, the Vikings might love the guy. I don't know if I would do that. I'd take McCarthy over Penix any day of the week. But Michael Penix, very fun to watch. Very good quarterback. I mean, 14,000 career yards in college football. He's a transfer from Indiana. But the first 2 things that I like about the guy is when you watch tape, his pre-read of defense before the snap, he's very, very good at noticing some of these reads. He's ahead of the game on that. A lot of these college guys won't opt out of a play. He's really good at the pre-snap stuff, reading the defense. I think he's ahead of everybody on that. And also, when Michael Penix has a bad play, he doesn't get down on himself. He forgets it and moves to the next one. And a lot of these guys, both when you're a young quarterback, you can turn into Ryan Leaf pretty quick. Start worrying about everything that you're doing wrong. Penix has a good, if something bad happens, he moves on to the next play, and I like that with the psyche of a quarterback. We all know about the long ball. He's the best. He's the best deep passer I've seen on tape since Warren Moon.
Wow.
Who?
Penix. Most accurate,
that's a lot of-
beautiful. I couldn't. I was talking to Ruby. I said, "When's the last time I talked about somebody with the deep passing? Not only the accuracy, how the pass. I mean, it just looks like a pass that's formulated in the laboratory or something. It doesn't look real. It's a perfect spiral, and it usually lands right on the numbers. He's an amazing deep ball thrower, but with him, I know people talk about the injuries. I'd like to get your guys' take. I'm not worried about the injuries because the second one he's played 2 full seasons at Washington without an injury. When are people going to stop with the injury thing with Michael Penix? 2 full seasons.
It's the
Come
Minnesota
on.
Vikings. We have weird injury stuff happen to us,
Well,
whether it be Sam Bradford or whether it be Teddy Bridgewater. Quarterbacks and knees don't go well together.
And you got to love the long passing. 14 deep touchdowns in 2022, 16 in 2023. I'm not worried about the injuries. I'm more worried about him checking it down too quick. That's one of the things that bothers me about his game is he gets out of that. He doesn't read through all the progressions, and he goes right out to, goes out to the running back for a screen or the wide receiver on a flare screen or a boom screen. And I'd like to see him pick up that part of his game, but and let's be honest. Some GMs don't want a left-handed quarterback. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
They got everything going with the other side, passing the ball with a righty. So I don't know that if you, like I said on the show, Vikings Report, if you want to know the true sense of Michael Penix, go back and watch the games he played at Indiana because he wasn't very good. And then he wasn't very good against Michigan. So you got to be able to be good not only against the baloney tech universities, you got to be good against the top-notch talent. And I also mentioned that's like the Jay Cutler thing. I call it the Jay Cutler syndrome. Jay Cutler was on Vanderbilt. He had crap all around him, and he still shredded. So you got to be able to make your team better. Although that Texas game he had, that's one of the best quarterback games I've ever seen. Is he too inconsistent, though?
Yes.
Should he have played better against Michigan? And let's not forget, I mentioned the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line Michigan had in the previous 2 years. Last year was Washington. They won the Joe Moore. So I think Penix has made big strides for himself. 98 career touchdowns. He could throw the ball all over the yard, but Can he be consistent against better teams? And I also think he's going to have to sit. You throw him out there too early, you're going to ruin him. You're going to ruin that guy if you throw him out there too early. I'm telling you right now.
And we've seen that before.
If they took him at 11, I wouldn't be totally bummed, but he wouldn't be my first choice there.
Fair enough.
Well, and we talked about, I'm going to deviate just a little bit. We talked about who gets taken in the top 10 if we're still sitting in 11. And if the guys that KOC and Kwesi fancied are gone, do they wait? Do they go defense and then wait till the second round to see if somebody's there? And Penix might be that guy at that point.
Yeah, and then they could do some maneuvering up to get, I don't think any of these guys are going to make it much past the late first. I got a first or second written on my board here, but you know what teams do when the players get to be 26, 27, 28 on the board? People trade up and take them so they can get that fifth year option on the guy. So people might be trading into the back half of the draft to get him. I think Penix could drop, but you're going to have to move up to get him. He ain't going to be there at 42. That's for none of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Rattler might be, but
speaking of,
brings us to the next question. Of the big six, Williams, May, Daniels, Nix, Penix, and McCarthy, there's another guy that you happen to like.
I do like Spencer.
I like Rattler.
I like him because he's a lot more mature than he used to be in high school and in Oklahoma. So I think he's made the turn. The first thing you got to look at with Rattler is, besides Xavier Leggett, the wide receiver, who's a very good wide receiver. I'll be talking about him next week when I do wide receivers. Besides him, he really didn't have any other weapons on offense. He had the worst offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines in college football. And if you look at the schedule, top 5 hardest schedule in college football. And people don't look at all those things. You gotta factor in all that crap, Dave, because all that matters. Shitty offensive line and a tough schedule. That, and he still held his own. I just like how he keeps his eyes downfield, you talked about earlier. And something that he does, and not all quarterbacks do it, he seems to feel the pressure before he has to see it and get out of trouble. McCarthy's good at that too. They know when the pressure's coming and they bail out and they try to make a play out of the pocket instead of waiting until it's too late and taking the sack. Yeah, I like that about Rattler.
The master of that was Tom Brady. He could feel it and just, take a couple steps sideways, forward, backwards, whatever, and avoid it.
When you're married to Gisele Bündchen, you can feel it pretty easy. Let me tell you. No, I like he's a real pump up your teammates. He really wants to win. He's competitive as hell. I just like that about a quarterback. He's got a little bit of that Favre in him, got a little bit of anger, but he's had a lot of football experience. I think people are down on Rattler, and I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised. In 3 years, when this draft bails out, people are going to be saying, wow, Rattler was the guy nobody took until later. I really do.
Is he too old?
Drew.
Huh?
What's his age? He's like 25, isn't he?
She had 2 years at Oklahoma and then only had 1 year. Yeah, 23, I think, isn't he?
Okay, so he's still in there.
Got it.
He had 2 years at South Carolina. I think he had 2 years at South Carolina.
He is 23 years old.
That's not bad.
3,100 and 69% completion. Played 48 games in college, 77 touchdowns, 37 picks. Had kind of a pick problem, but that was when he was at Oklahoma and lost his job to Caleb Williams. Nothing was going right. He wasn't happy there. And Oklahoma was supposed to be his school growing up, Dave. He was supposed to be the next big thing there. And Chris Gase had mentioned, look who he's following. Baker Mayfield, all those guys that played at Oklahoma, and he had to follow in the footsteps, and he didn't cut it there. And Caleb Williams took his job. And he got mad and he transferred, but he's maturing now. He used to be an awful teammate in high school. Oh, just an awful teammate. His behavior was really shitty, really entitled to himself and yelled at his coaches. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen the footage of him screaming at his coaches in high school, and he was very uncoachable. He was just entourage, drive around in a limo and all that. He's turned the corner from all that. That was why he failed at Oklahoma, I think.
Well, and
From
the
the neck
fans in
up.
Oklahoma turned on him, and
Yeah. And since he was supposed to be, sliced bread there, he was embarrassed by the whole thing, how the whole thing turned out, and then losing his job to another guy. But from the neck up, he is really maturing, and I think he's going to be a surprise in this draft.
One final question, Drew, although you got into it a little bit earlier before we let you go, is just Jaden Daniels, super uber talented. You called him like the best scrambling quarterback you've seen. I think, did you say he was better than Michael Vick last week? I believe that's what you said. Yeah.
Yes.
And when you say somebody's better scrambler than Michael Vick, who's considered the greatest scrambling quarterback probably ever, that's a pretty damn high praise. But okay, Caleb Williams goes number 1. Drake May goes number 2. Daniels is sitting there at 3. Do the Vikings do whatever it takes to go and get him?
Why does the last question of the day always have to be the most difficult? This is thrilling. I knew it.
I still have one more, but trust me.
Shit. I'm going to say the Vikings, if they were going to trade up for Richardson from Florida, they're going to trade up for this guy. I would be happy if they traded up for him because playmaker, the only thing I'm worried about with him is his frame. Can he last a long time? Because he's not, he's not very, he's 6'4", but he doesn't play like that. He's very not run out of bounds and not sliding and put his head down and try to grind through people. He's not going to last very long if he does that. He's going to have to get that out of his game. But I'm going to say, yes, they do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's time the Minnesota Vikings made a move at quarterback, guys. They need to splash at quarterback. They haven't had it. I mean, the last splash they had was Teddy, who was a decent quarterback, but they made a move to get him. They haven't had – I mean, Cousins has been a great quarterback, but you watch Jaden Daniels, he'll be outselling the Jefferson jerseys in a couple of years if he's on the Vikings. That guy is exciting to watch. He's an exciting quarterback. Something you should throw out there, though, that I've said to other people, he's had Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors to throw to. Those are 2 guys that are going to go in the first round. Those are 2. I did both their draft write-ups today, and I looked at Ruby, I said, I think it's got to be said that Daniels had these guys to throw to. That makes a big difference because both those guys are week 1 ready NFL players. So how much does that make a difference in Jaden Daniels' game? If he didn't have those guys, would he have been as dynamic? I don't know.
Well, if he comes to Minnesota, he has Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison.
You would love that.
Whatever quarterback comes, that's the sweetest setup you can have. And then throw T.J. Hawkinson in on the back end once he's healed and ready to play.
Daniels is impressive talent. Very explosive player, guys. I mean, he's effortless running through secondaries, effortlessly. I mean, you look at his tape from Alabama, everything. The only thing he did from Alabama, I had to rewind the tape a couple times. He kept missing this flanker crossing route where, the right wide receiver takes the DB and then heads down the sidelines and drags the safety over to him. Right. So it clears out that side. They had the left wide receiver cutting across the middle wide open on like 3 plays. And he went for the long ball with the double coverage. And I kept looking at it. I could rewind it going, oh, how did you not see that guy? If he sees that guy, he's probably trailing the play into the end zone. So he does miss some passes, but all these guys miss passes. The clock on their head isn't fast enough. They need to be better against they need to read defenses better. All these young guys have pretty much the same problem. So you can't really say a guy's, you know what I'm saying, Dave? They're all kind of learning the same thing.
And it's a huge step up to the NFL level. Now, that brings us the final question. All right, the Vikings have been suffering for forever. We haven't had a franchise quarterback since this guy. All right. We've attempted with Dante Culpepper and Dante Culpepper until his knee blew out. Like I said, quarterbacks and knees are a thing in Minnesota. And then Teddy was working that way until his knee blew out. We haven't had a true franchise quarterback that has the possibility of taking us over the hump. Oop, there goes my camera. And back to the Super Bowl like this man did.
Right.
Is that...
In all fairness, he had some pretty good players around him.
He sure did. And whoever's coming in has some good players available to them as well.
That's true.
The defense may not be as legendary as of yet, but we're working on it. We'll get into that in the third theme. But anybody in this class, do you think could be that guy, that franchise quarterback, the guy with the it factor? Not only does he have the skill, but he has the it factor that we talked about years ago. A quarterback needs to have to lead men into battle, as if you want to call it that, to win football games, to take the team on his shoulder and actually win. Is there anybody on your board that can do that?
These questions get tougher by the minute. This better be the last one.
It is the last one.
I'm going to say Caleb Williams is the most Mahomes quarterback I've seen with all my studies. He gives me the Mahomes vibe, but I'm not sure about the leadership and from the neck up and all that kind of stuff. I think there's questions with that. So that would take him out of that running. I'm going to say JJ McCarthy. You guys are going to think I'm just a homer. I would say McCarthy or Drake May would be, and Daniels. I think all three of those guys are going to be franchise top 10 quarterbacks. I think Drake May is going to be fantastic when he gets more starts under his belt. Like I said, he has 1/3 of the starts of Bo Nix, and he's already better than him. I like Dave. We talked quarterback for 6-7 years. You know how I like guys who progress, who get better and better and better. Drake May, and then Drake May, he's a pocket guy, but then he'll take off and run for 60 yards. So he's got a little bit of the best of both. I take it back. Drake May is probably going to have be the best guy to get you that. I know that sounds kind of crazy. It's hard to say somebody's going to have the success of Fran Tarkenton, and I don't see really anybody being like that.
Yeah.
But Mahomes is the closest thing to it, only he's better. He's
the good thing about the exciting thing about this draft, guys, is you got 6-7 guys with the Rat Man, with Rattlesnake. You got 6-7 guys and maybe a guy really late that they're all going to be really good. It's going to be fun to track them. And you guys all know that who you go to makes a difference. What team you go to. Teams that go to the Giants, quarterbacks that go to the Giants, besides Eli, seem to fail. And but that top 10 of the draft, we're all going to have to get together and do some shots, that top 10 of the draft, because that's going to be nuts, you guys. Trading up, people trading this, and it could get really crazy, but we got a lot of quarterbacks that are going to end up being good. Take my word for it. This isn't going to be a draft where you get 1 or 2 starters. There's going to be a lot of starters out of this draft, if they're handled right. Not thrown to the wolves too soon.
And by doing shots, do you mean you're going to get to hop onto my show and I get to hop onto yours and we'll do some tequila shots or something during the draft?
Let's do it. Do it.
You heard it first here, folks.
We're going to yes, we are. We're going to do some shots with David Stefano, and we're going to get some sackles going, baby.
Absolutely. I got to love sackles. And we're going to talk about that in theme 3. But first off, Drew, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your wonderful, beautiful quarterback big board, and talking to us about those fine young men that are coming out and taking the next step in their football careers.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for letting me be on, and thank you for having such a great show. The Bloggers show is, I tell you, it's one of the best. I'd say Bloggers, Vikings Report, watch that back-to-back, and you're set for the day.
Oh, no doubt about it.
No.
Darren, I wanted to remind Darren that Jimi Hendrix is still the greatest of all time, and also, you still don't have the Stanley Cup there, and in Canada, what are you waiting for?
Not since the Canadiens won it for so many times.
Darren
and I, like 40 years now.
We used to argue about that all the time in the old room we were in together about hockey.
Team USA won the World Juniors hockey championships this year.
Oh, meow, meow.
Hey, if you don't know, everybody that's watching, and we appreciate it. If you don't know, Drew is part of Vikings Report with Drew and Ted. Ted is Ted Glover. You saw him in the chat. They've also added, who used to guest on occasion, but now going to be more regular, Mr. Christopher Gates, the grand poobah of the Daily Norseman himself. It is a fantastic show.
Give a shout out to Toonses, because without Toonses, it goes nowhere.
Correct.
Trust me, Tootses is the producer, and she's had to deal with what I dealt with Good Morning Gallagher back in the day. I feel for Tootses. I very much give Tootses all the credit, but Tootses does a great job, and we love her. But
thank you, everybody out there.
Those guys are different. Not only do they talk football, they bust it up with a sense of humor that you can't find anywhere else in Vikings land. And if you like to laugh and talk Vikings football, check out Vikings Report with Drew and Ted.
When we started it, we wanted to have a football show to talk about football, but we just wanted to do our own little twist on it. We wanted to make it a little bit unique, so each episode has kind of, that's why we do a movie or a show, and it can't be done without Toonses, and it certainly can't be done without Ted Glover, who's absolute. You and Ted Glover kind of run the hosting business in this podcast nation out of all the podcasts. But Ted Glover is an amazing host, and he makes my life. I'm just a lackey. He makes it pretty easy, Ted Glover. So we wanted to have something just a little different than just sitting and talking football, and I think we do. I think people like it.
One last question. You talk about doing movies. Have you done the Wolverines, both movies, especially since you won the national championship?
We have not, but we're going to do it next week. I like that idea.
I want to hear Wolverines.
Well, we also got some great Nina Hartley movies we're going to throw up there. So,
OMG.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Thank you, bud. And you have a good rest of the weekend. We're going to continue on to Theme 2 here momentarily.
Rock on!
That was great. That was great, Darren. I'm sure you appreciated it as much as I did.
I did, and I also appreciate all the comments we've been having from various people. I haven't been able to acknowledge almost any of them, but they've been coming in fast and furious.
Yes, they have.
Thank you.
Yes, they have. Now, on to Theme 2. And, of course, I got to hit the button to get the noise. There we go. Theme 2.
Yes.
This week in Vikings land.
Indeed. A couple of topics. We'll have to try to quicken things up. The college QB talk was so involved. We just a full hour of it. But you had the intro to this show about JJ and the contract extension. We talked about it last week. Going to talk about it again a little bit here, mainly because Mike Florio, founder of Pro Football Talk and diehard Vikings fan, has been stirring up the pot quite a bit this week on this issue, talking about why the Vikings, he's basically called out the Vikings organization for why they have not signed Justin Jefferson to an extension yet. And what he's saying is that they need to not only sign him to an extension, but he's so good they need to sign him to an extension that's fully guaranteed. Now, we don't know, and fully guaranteed is what they have given Kirk Cousins over and over and over again in those contracts and extensions that they've signed with him. It's an interesting thing because, of course, Florio does not know. Had a hard time spitting that one out because I was so silent for so long.
Sorry,
I forgot how to talk, but we don't know if what he's thinking is, if he's got any inside sources, if Justin Jefferson's management team does want a fully guaranteed deal. But there's always a first time. We say that before. And Justin Jefferson would seem to be the guy that you'd want to make an exception for, with 389 catches in his career, 5,899 receiving yards. Nobody has done that as a wide receiver in their first 4 years ever in the NFL. So just pay the man. It's that simple, right? Well, maybe not so simple, Dave. And you were talking about this online. You were mentioning that, the way that the rules go with the fully guaranteed is that portion has to go into escrow. Well, Justin Jefferson, if you're looking at his whatever extension he's going to sign, it's going to be massive. It's going to be well north of $100 million. If you look at Tyreek Hill's record-setting deal for a wide receiver right now, he was the one. He got 4 years, $120 million. I think $53 million of that was guaranteed, so not the full 120. Well, you look at Justin Jefferson. If he wants a fully guaranteed everything, that's probably going to be more than probably 5 years, not 4, and it's going to be more than 120 million. You make up the number that it's going to be. Well, 120 plus fully guaranteed, putting that into escrow, along with all the other guarantees that the Vikings are going to have to give out to players that they sign or keep. You were saying, it could be anywhere from 250 million in escrow in total. Now, that is an amount that is going to be hard to come up with all at once for Ziggy and Marv Will. They probably would like to avoid doing that, putting in that much into escrow right away. And teams generally have avoided the guaranteed deals like the bubonic plague because, of course, football is such a physical sport. Careers don't last long. Guys get injured all the time. If you're going to pay somebody fully guaranteed, you want them to be on the field producing in some way, shape, or form all the time, so they're earning that money and not in the tub or on the surgeon's table during that length of time. So, yeah,
it's
we
a
know
risk
Justin
versus reward thing that the NFL looks at. How much risk am I taking by guaranteeing money over the long term when the stats show me you're not going to earn that money over that long term, and most likely you'll get hurt? So they don't want to pay it, right? Which makes sense. It's a business thing. They don't want to pay it. But the players, they want it, right? It makes sense. Hey, guarantee me all the money. I'll do what you want. I blow my Achilles and I'm out for a year. Too bad, you're still paying me.
Yeah. And so with it, the whole guaranteed thing, you were doing a little bit of sleuthing, Dave, and really the only two, Kirko has gotten his fully guaranteed, Deshaun Watson gotten his fully guaranteed. You couldn't find anybody else in the NFL that has gotten a fully guaranteed deal.
Not
yet.
over a multi-year contract.
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten fully guaranteed for one, but not for multi-year. Yeah.
So is Justin Jefferson going to be the first non-quarterback to get a multi-year fully guaranteed deal? If you're his management, again, you want everything that you can possibly get coming to you dollar-wise. There's always a first time. Justin Jefferson, with the track record he has, would be a guy who would be a prime candidate to do that. But when it comes to signing that extension, because of the financial implications for the Wilfs and the ownership group, putting it in escrow, signing him to extension, if he's looking for fully guaranteed, it makes things a lot more complicated. I still think something is going to get done, just like I said last week. But this means that there's a bit more maneuvering to go about, and it might take longer than we would like, and probably Justin Jefferson would like. Norfus was saying that, as far as paying the man, he makes a good point there about no team has ever been built around a wide receiver. I'd have to look that up and see if that's actually the case. But you're right. Generally, teams that want to go to the Super Bowl build it around a quarterback, not a prime wide receiver, no matter how good they are.
But generally, those quarterbacks have very good wide receivers on their team. It generally takes both to make it happen, because you're not going to have a quarterback win tons of Super Bowls, make it to the Super Bowls and win tons of Super Bowls, even in the running age, without some good receivers.
Yes.
So, and you got to pay somebody.
You do. So But it's getting tricky if this is actually what's part of what's going on, and it's the reason maybe that this didn't get done in 2023 and it hasn't gotten done yet in 2024.
As I understand it, they agreed on the number last year, right? Before the 2023 season, they agreed on the number. They couldn't agree on the guarantees. And this is the sticking point, the guarantees. Now, is it that JJ wants everything guaranteed, right? And there's levels of guarantees, right? There's guaranteed for playing, and then there's guarantees for everything, including injury. Because generally, if a player gets injured, say, especially if it's off the field, then they go into a lower bracket and don't get paid as much. If somebody goes on IR, depending on how the contract's written, they may get their pay dropped because they are on IR, especially if it's non-football related. And you never know. JJ could be driving perfectly fine, riding in the back of a limo, and then suddenly gets hit by a bus, and JJ's got a broken hip and is in the hospital, is going to miss the season. God forbid, right? Something can happen. How does the team cover themselves? Are they going to pay him on a guaranteed contract? Yes, they're going to pay him some money, but he's injured. Should they pay him his full salary because he's injured? Or do they defer that and pay him an extra year like they did with Teddy? How they go about that. So guarantees are different. If it's completely 100% fully guaranteed, meaning he's going to get every dollar there is, like Watson's contract, it doesn't matter what Watson does. He gets paid, right? Watson can go to a masseuse and then get another lawsuit, go to jail, and he still gets paid because that's the way his contract's written. Most NFL teams want to have some sort of out on that. So they'll write in sort of different stuff, whether it be for injury, whether it be for off-field trouble of some sort or whatever. They'll write something in there. Now, what does JJ want? What is his meaning of guaranteed? And this is besides the fact that if he goes 5 years, $185 million at $35 million a year, that's will make him the highest non-quarterback played player. Well, if that's all guaranteed, suddenly the Wolves got to put in $185 million in escrow, and then whatever other contracts they do this year, the guaranteed money they got to put in, that's going to run up $200 to $250 million. That may be fine for the Wolves because they don't make their money via football. They make their money via their real estate business, right? So they may have the money to liquefy to do that. Not all teams do. The rich teams do. Dallas is one of them that could make fungible that sort of cash and put it in the bank because it's got to go in there. But other teams don't. And what the NFL's afraid of, and while they're pushing back on this, is that if suddenly it starts happening, then that parity that we've had tends to go away because then the big money teams, Dallas is one, right, that have that money can go for the bigger players and just literally outbid everybody else in the league on it because they can, hey, I can throw $250,000 in an escrow account. You can't. Sorry. A lot of the owners use running their team as their income. Now, like I said, the Wolves don't. We're lucky there. The Wolves have their real estate business to do that. But it's still hard to come up, if you're going to think of, this year come up, let's say 200 to 250 million in cash just to put in the bank. That's not easy when you're valued at $4 billion. People may think that's easy, but when a lot of that money's tied up in assets and not liquid, that can be tough. So it's interesting to see. Now that's on a long-term contract. We're talking 5 years, right? He's going to be 25 this year. If he may not want a long-term contract. This is another thing. He may want a shorter-term contract. They may have given him guarantees and said, we want it 5 years so that we can play with money as you go on. The Patrick Mahomes, the 10-year contract, we can move money to make stuff happen and get players and stuff all the way up until the end, right? Because you got room to move it out. We can turn signing bonus into roster bonus or vice versa or whatever it is, like we've done with Brian O'Neill type stuff. You can do that. The money guys can play with money to help the team. Well, what if he wants it guaranteed, but only 3 years, so that in 3 years he hits the market again? And at that point, he's only 28, still in his prime, possibly still in his prime, and can go for another huge contract. And the Vikings are saying, if we're going to give you guaranteed money, we want you locked in for longer. I think that's where the sticking point lies in one of those two scenarios, whether it's short-term guaranteed to go back on the market, or if it's long-term and it's not fully guaranteed. I'm hearing that the Vikings don't want to guarantee more than 1 year. I sort of doubt that. I bet they would guarantee more than that, but I'm not quite sure they're willing to guarantee a whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's got the Vikings land in all sorts of flutter. People are wondering, oh my God, what are we going to do? The Vikings are going to screw this up. We're going to waste Justin Jefferson. We're going to lose him, aren't we? And I don't blame them. We're Vikings fans. We're used to the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and we've had to trade away Randy Moss and Stephon Diggs, who are two of the best receivers. If you look at the top 10 we've had in franchise history, those guys are right in there, obviously, and we had to trade those guys away too for different reasons, but they were gone. So it's certainly not out of the question that another big name wide receiver could also not be with the team. Even though we would prefer that not be the case. Again, I'm not worried about it, but again, it's getting complicated.
It very well is. Now, the only optimism I want to give to the people, yes, Norsefius, we're both on the same microphones, a Rode Procaster microphone. The only bit of optimism is the Vikings control him for the next 3 years if they want. He's still under contract for this year. And I think he's scheduled, I didn't look it up, but I think he's scheduled to make like $18 or $19 million this year.
It'd be over 19 million, this coming
19 million this year. And then they could franchise him after that. And next year's franchise for a wide receiver, I think, is estimated just under 22 million. And then they could franchise him a second year in a row after that. And that would be 120% of whatever that franchise tag is. Figure 28 million tops. And they're still paying him less than 30 million a year. Now, he gets all that money. That turns out to be a guarantee. If you franchise somebody, that's guaranteed money. He's going to get all of it. But that's 3 years of Justin Jefferson, which would leave him at 28. At that point, he'd be disgruntled and he'd want to leave, like Kirk Cousins left Washington after 2 franchise tags, and they would let him go. But it's a way the Vikings can keep him, and he literally has no say. He can throw a fit, he can sit out, camp and stuff, but once they start playing games, he's got to show up, or he gets fined and loses money in years. So it's however you want to do that. So there's leverage on both sides of this debate, between his camp and the Vikings. How it's going to go, I don't know. I don't think having Kirk Cousins there as quarterback has anything to do with it. I think he made that perfectly clear. He'll catch footballs from it. So he likes Kirk. Why wouldn't he? But I think he'll catch footballs from anybody. Well, that brings us to the second topic that happened in Vikings land. One not quite so stressful, thankfully.
No, this week the Vikings looked like they've solidified their 2024 coaching staff. There was a few potential openings on there, and I just wanted to touch base with that. The first one was that Mike Pettine, the guy pictured there, he got officially named as their outside linebackers coach, tacked on to his title as assistant head coach. He's replacing Mike Smith, who had been on personal leave of absence since September the 4th. So he's gone on there. Vikings also announced that Marcus Dixon is going to be their defensive line coach. He replaces Crip Rumpf, who took the job, also left early in the year and then took the job with Clemson to be their defensive line coach. Dixon spent the last 2 years as the defensive line coach for the Broncos. And then Durante Jones, our passing game coordinator, defensive back coach, also was the defensive coordinator for, I think, the national team at the Senior Bowl this year. Mm-hmm. He got interviewed by the Giants for their defensive coordinator job as a potential replacement to Wink Martindale. He did not get it, so he's returning. And I think that solidifies the whole Vikings coaching staff for 2024, which is a good thing. And Dave, as Viking fans, I think that we tend to, when it comes to coaches, the big names and the people we focus on are usually the head coach and then the coordinators. Right. We don't tend to make as big a deal about the positional coaches, but I think a positional coach, if you get a really good one, they can make a big, great impact on your team. And I think of a guy, and I hate to bring it up as an example, but Tom Clements with that team from Wisconsin, their quarterback coach. He has been given a ton of credit for turning Aaron Rodgers into a Hall of Famer and working on his footwork and his throwing motion and getting him to that. And now he's also been given a ton of credit for Jordan Love's impressive second half of the year as quarterback with Green Bay. So Clements is a former CFL quarterback, Tom Clements, a Hall of Famer in the CFL, actually. But Clements is an example of a positional coach who can make a big impact. And so positional wise, it's wise for us to take note of these hires that the Vikings make and track what kind of success that they have. I think of those three, the one that I want to highlight most is Mike Pettine. I think it'd be safe to say that when he got hired by Kevin O'Connell last year, a lot of Viking fans did not receive that very warmly, remembering his time mostly not very effective as a defensive coordinator with that team from Wisconsin. We were happy about Pettine's defenses and how they performed with Green Bay. Right. We were scared that that was going to translate into how they would perform in Minnesota. Well, last year, essentially, he was the Vikings outside linebacker coach, and I think it's wise to take a look at how the players performed under his tutelage, and a couple to keep in mind. Danielle Hunter, maybe it wasn't his best year as a pro, but he did rack up 16.5 sacks, career high there. And DJ Wanham, I think, was playing the best football of his career until he injured his quad late in the season and was out. But those are two guys that had really strong years. I think Pettine's coaching had to have something to do with that. So him returning and being the outside linebackers coach, maybe that is the sweet spot for him as a head coach or as a coach. Like, that's where he can have the most impact. And so I'm going to be very interested in tracking how the players under his charge in 2024 in the outside linebackers position, how they fare and whether he can take the players that he's got and keep them, get them up to, an extra level, get them playing the best that they have ever played. Kind of like how we view Keenan McCardell and the work that he does with the wide receivers, the Vikings wide receivers.
I gotcha. It's going to be interesting. All right. That brings us to theme 3. The big round bellies on the defensive side of the ball. The interior defensive lineman.
Yes, and this is the latest segment on looking at the Vikings positional units and looking at what they've got, what we think they should do, what they might do, and taking a look at the state of it. And this is the first one. We've gone through all the offensive units. Now we're starting with the defensive side of the ball. Roscoe Pico train, bringing up some Tom Clements. CFL knowledge there says he played with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He played with a lot of teams in the CFL, actually. The Ottawa Rough Riders, Saskatchewan Rough Riders. Yes, there's used to be two teams called the Rough Riders in the CFL, even though there's only 9 teams in the league. That's always an old joke. Played with the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
And Canadian whiskey was involved with that.
Yeah. They're spelled a little differently, but they were 2 Rough Riders. Now there's only one. Ottawa has a team, but they're called the Red Blacks, not the Rough Riders. Anyway, Tom Clements, I know him well because I was a Ottawa fan, and he used to be a quarterback for my team. So anyway, on to the Vikings defensive line. Defensive line, I think it's a unit in the 3-4, the defensive line, the interior guys. Typically, they're the guys that don't put up the big eye-popping stats, don't get a lot of sacks, don't get a lot of tackles for losses. They have, the linebackers and the edge guys do all of that. And for the Vikings, the past couple of years in the 3-4 defense, they have lived up to that billing. They're not, kind of an anonymous group, not putting up a lot of numbers that, to write home about, made up of a lot of, I think, what we call the strong silent type, maybe silent for sure, maybe strong, I don't know, but
that's funny.
You've got a unit there. You've got to fill it with guys. What are the Vikings going to do on the defensive line this year? Well, the best of the bunch that we've got right now is Harrison Phillips. I know Pro Football Focus gave him pretty poor grades this year, Dave, but I actually thought that he was more noticeable to me this year than he was in his first year with the Vikings in 2022. I thought, I thought he created some good interior pressure when we made a strong play defending the run, and we were much better against the run this year than last year. I thought it was often because of something Harrison Phillips did. Now, maybe he wasn't making the tackle himself, but he was occupying blockers, creating some pressure, getting into gaps, and blowing up plays, and other guys made the tackle or strung out the play because of something Harrison Phillips did.
Right. He was the one eating up blocks and causing push left or right that funneled a running back into a defender. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Especially in the run game, he did well. Now, pass rush,
yeah, he's
lacking,
and it is, but he's never been a huge pass rush presence. The Vikings knew that when they signed him. That's not what he's here for. What he is here for is what he did, I think, last year in 2023, and I thought he did that pretty well. He's the best that we got along the defensive line right now, who is under contract. Now, the thing is, the other 2 guys that are under contract for the Vikings along the defensive line are Dean Lowry and Jake Roy. Well, Lowry played very badly, I thought, last year. Then he had I believe it was a tricep injury or a bicep injury. He was out for basically half of the year. He signed for another year. He had a $4.5 million cap hit, I think, which isn't very much. But considering his age, the type of production the Vikings got from last year, which was pretty poor, the fact that they could cut him on pre-June 1st and save about $2 million in cap. If they cut him post June the 1st, they could save basically almost all of that $4 million. I don't think Lowry's going to be back next year, even though he's under contract.
But do you want to do the post June 1st thing? All that gets you is it spreads out the cap hit over this year.
I think if they would get rid of him, it would be before that, because they've got to make some roster decisions before they get into training camp. They don't want to be dealing with that, but I don't think he will be back. Jake Roy is the other guy that is under contract right now. He was a rookie last year, pretty much did nothing on the field of any note during that time, but he was always, I think, viewed as a project guy anyway. He probably came into the draft. He probably went into the draft maybe a year too early.
He was a day 3 guy.
Yes, he was a day 3 guy, but an upside guy too, I think was. But I think it's hard to know what to expect from him the next season. He's certainly going to get an opportunity to get a lot more playing time and earn a lot more playing time than he did as a rookie. But whether he does much with that, We don't know. I think best case scenario is that Jake Monroy either earns a starting job or at least a heavy rotational job where he's playing a lot of snaps, even if he isn't the starter. So after those three guys, though, Dave, it's everybody else is not under contract. And so a whole bunch of, well, who knows, right? Jonathan Bullard, James Lynch was mentioned below, TJ Smith, blah, 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 blah. There's a number of those guys, kind of faceless dudes that the Vikings are going to have, I think, try to bring one or two of those guys back.
Right.
Which of those guys they're going to bring back, I think you could, toss a coin, flip a coin, and you probably have as much luck as we would by figuring out who is going to be. They'll all be cheap to retain if the Vikings want to, and you probably wouldn't have to sign them for more than a year. They fill up, and they're going to have to do it because you do need to fill out your roster spots and have some depth there and some competition at defensive line. But which of those guys are coming back? Which of those guys would I like to come back? Maybe Kairos Tonga, maybe. I don't know. Bullard, I thought, played well for what he had to do, but he's 32 years old. Do I really want to bring him back again?
Right. Yeah, he's over that. He's over that hump. Now, Kairos Tonga, when you look at the deep analytics on the pass rush PRP, pass rush something percentage, the most effective interior defensive lineman when it comes to pass rush per PFF, ranked at number 43 out of all defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, was Kairos Tonga. And we barely played him last year. Yeah, we played him late, but was it too little too late, or was it just happened to be that way?
I don't know. I think Tonga's snap counts were so minimal that I don't know if we can take a lot out of that grading. But yeah, looking at it, either way you look at it, I think the Vikings need to add some talent there. The question that comes to mind is Brian Flores, does he really have much use for defensive linemen? Kevin Seifert had a story a couple of weeks ago where he looked and he brought up that Flores used defensive linemen the least of anybody in the NFL. Like there was 1/3 of the defensive snaps for the Vikings that we had one or less defensive linemen. So less than one is zero. Wow. That was the most. 1/3 of our defensive snaps, we had only at the most one defensive lineman on the field out of 11 defensive players. That hadn't happened since 2006. Now it's fair to ask though whether Flores did that because he just felt that the talent level on the defensive line was so poor that a lot of the guys didn't warrant a whole lot of playing time, or is it a scheme thing that he's going to continue to do? He's only been the defensive coordinator here for 1 year, Dave, so I don't think I can make a call on that right now. But to me, I think you feel the same way, Dave, is that a great player is a great player is a great player, whether they're free safety, corner, running back, whatever. And a great player can help your team a lot if you get him. Doesn't matter what position. So I don't think Flores actually thinks defensive linemen are irrelevant. We just need to get some good ones.
Yes, I think that's it.
We've seen what Chris Jones is kind of how he can wreck a game. We've seen how Aaron Donald can wreck a game. I didn't see it, but I certainly heard about it. Alan Page, one of the greatest.
I saw it way back as a kid.
Maybe the greatest Viking of all time. Yeah. Defensive linemen and defensive tackles, interior guys who made a humongous difference. Some of them still are in their team's performance, in their defensive performance. The Vikings can get a guy like that. Why wouldn't you take him? And I think Brian Flores said I have no problem with that. Free agency. Do we attack one there? Well, there are some good defensive tackles who potentially could hit the market. You're looking at Chris Jones is one. Jason Matabuke is another. And then you've also got, and I'm drawing a blank here right now. But,
Wilkinson.
Christian Wilkins. I'm going to take Chris Jones out of the picture here because I think he's going to turn 30. I think he's going to be a lot of money to re-sign him, which I don't think the Vikings are going to play it at his age in that group.
And I'm hearing the Chiefs may tag him.
Yes.
Franchise tag. And a franchise tag for a defensive lineman I think is probably relatively inexpensive versus what he would demand on the open market.
Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to be back in Kansas City next year. He won't be on the market, so I just take him out. But Madubuike and Wilkins are different because Baltimore has only got about $2 million under the cap right now. They're probably going to do some work, but and the Miami's cap space situation right now is horrendous. They're like 52, scheduled to be 52 mil.
They're almost as bad as the Saints. Yes.
Yes. So I think Wilkins is a guy that they won't be able to retain even if they would like to. Now, Wilkins with Madubuike, he had a fantastic season this year. If he hits the market and I'm Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I'm making the call to his team right away to see what the price is. The problem is you're not getting on the ground floor with him. He's going to be, he just had a fantastic year. He's going to cash in, no doubt about it, but he's been consistently good since he's been in the league. He's only going to turn 27, I think, in November. So still in his prime. Again, he's a guy I would be looking at seriously if I'm Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Wilkins is the same thing, a little older than Madubuike, but I've always liked him as a player when I've seen him. He can rush the passer. He had 9 sacks last year, but he's also a guy who can create penetration and hold his own against the run. And he was drafted when Brian Flores was the head coach in Miami, so there's a bit of a linkage there. I don't know how Flores feels about Christian Wilkins, but considering the player that Wilkins has turned into, I think that Brian Flores would enjoy having Wilkins on his team.
So, and I got to tell you, Wilkins, looking through the photos, has the best sack celebration dance of a big man I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he dances.
We don't know how much that is worth, but it's something interesting to point out. But I think what the Vikings free agency coming up is going to really determine kind of how these things turn out, Dave, of course, because and what they do in free agency is going to form what they do in the draft and what they go after. But if the Vikings in free agency, if they sign Danielle Hunter, and maybe another veteran edge rusher, and there's some good ones that are set to hit the market there, then they're not going to try to go after Madubuike or Wilkins. I don't think they'll have the scratch to do that. So then the draft comes into play. But if they go after Wilkins or Madubuike on the defensive line type of things, then that means Danielle Hunter probably isn't coming back, in which case edge becomes something that you've got to address very, very early in the draft. So looking at the draft, say we bring back Danielle Hunter or DJ Wanham or sign Huff from the New York Jets or however it all turns out.
Right.
And we've got our edge rushers. We've got the edge rushing room pretty much set up. Then Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I think, is going to look really hard, maybe not in round 1, but certainly in round 2, for an interior guy to give Brian Flores somebody else besides Harrison Phillips to play with and infuse that talent. And who could those guys be? Well, there's a bunch of them, of course, but some names out there. The Newton kid from Illinois is a guy that's thought of pretty highly.
I love Chris Jenkins. Belly on this one.
Yeah, that's a big one. Chris Jenkins from Drew's school, the Michigan Wolverines. Mm-hmm. Another guy of pretty highly. Darius Robinson from Missouri. Tyler Fornes, very, very liked what he saw from him at the Senior Bowl. And he's a guy that's looked to go into he's a kind of a second rounder, potentially edging up into late in the first. That's where he's predicted to go. Tavondre Sweat, he's been mentioned here earlier. I don't know about him so much because he would definitely be your space-eating nose tackle type of dude.
Right, the fire plug.
The fire plug. And do we want second round? I could see us trying that, but I didn't watch him very closely when they played Washington in the semifinal game, but he's got questions about his effort, questions about how much he's weighing too much these days, but there isn't any question about his talent. But he's one of the top rated interior guys. And then Jakelin Roy's old teammate Mason Smith had a disappointing year last year with the Tigers, not as good as his previous year, but apparently he's coming out in the draft. Massive talent, massive human being. And if he's motivated, gets the right coaching and is, progresses plays up to his talent level, he could be a monster at the NFL level from everything I've read. And he'd be a guy that most NFL teams are going to look at in that second and third round area for looking for a disruptive, big body on their interior. And the Vikings certainly need one of those. So
and he obviously looks good in purple already.
That's right. Yeah, looks great in purple, just like Justin Jefferson does.
Yep. Or Jaden Daniels.
That's right. Yeah, Jaden Daniels. So yeah, I did again. How the Vikings address the defensive line in free agency. If they address it in free agency, then the draft you won't see them target an interior guy until later in the draft at day 3. But if they don't do that in free agency and take care of the edge rushing holes, then picking an interior guy early in the draft, I think is very much in play for this team. And some of the names I mentioned are some of the guys that could be a Viking in April.
Mm-hmm. Very well could be. And it's going to be fun to watch because we need help there. We need interior help big time, as well as edge help. I mean, other than quarterback, there's a lot of effort that needs to go in on the defensive side of the ball. And the quickest way to fill holes is through free agency. That starts March 13th. We have upcoming the combine, which starts here in a week and a half. And that's where they start talking. The illegal tampering starts happening. So it's going to be interesting to see how much Brian Flores has influence over Kwesi and KOC to fill some of these holes and get the needs that we want, and where we go in the draft with it. Hopefully we fill some of those holes in free agency, and then the draft is best player available, once we get past quarterback type deal. But it's going to be fun to watch.
It very much will be. And like John Musgrove mentions, how we handle Cousins and Hunter is going to dictate how we approach the draft and free agency for sure, full show, because
very much
the biggest amount of cash is going to go to them or not go to them.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Hey, folks, that brings us to the end of the show. It's been a long one. We've gone well over an hour and a half on this one. And we want to appreciate, first off, our guest, Drew Bunting, the Drewster, for coming in and giving his take on his quarterback big board. We talked about how Vikings land is all in a Twitter over Justin Jefferson, and will the Vikings make the right choices when it comes to his contract, and will he accept those choices? We'll find out. We don't know yet because it's still in flux, but the Vikings do control him, so I wouldn't worry that much as of yet. We talked about some of the new coaches and how that might affect the team. I don't think it's such a big deal other than it locks down what's going on in defense, and under Flores, I think that's a good thing. And we talked about the defensive line, the interior guys, the big round bellies over there that I love so much, and how we can improve that unit via free agency and through the draft. And we hope you've enjoyed our takes, our decades of wisdom added to this, and hopefully it happens. Any last words there, Darren?
Just to everybody here in the First and SKOL followers, you'd mentioned the combine, and there you were mentioning that First and SKOL is going to be hitting the combine very, very hard. So stay tuned to this channel for combine comments, shows, maybe a little bit of news. I'm assuming you and Tyler are going to be all over that stuff.
Every day, baby, every day. And Dylan, you are 100% correct. In a tizzy is a good way to describe that. With that, what do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings. Thanks everybody for sticking around for an hour and 40-minute plus show.
Yeah. You guys rock, and we love you. SKOL Vikings.
Go.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!